Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, item 2 on the agenda is any additions or deletions. Do we have any additions or deletions? If not, item 3, approval of the minutes of September 28, 2017. Do we have any motion with respect to those minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. And that motion was made by Dr. Day and seconded by Mr. Landers. Okay. Brings us to item 4. It's on the consent agenda. It's a quasi-judicial matter. I will go ahead and read it into the record. It's Lawson Non-Commercial Kennel, request for administrative permit use approval for a non-commercial kennel to keep up to 8 chickens. Jacob Lawson is the owner and agent. It's located at 495 13th Place Southwest. The zoning district is RS6, residential, single family up to 6 units per acre. The land use designation is L2, low density, residential 2, up to 6 units per acre. As I say, it's quasi-judicial, and even though it's on consent, I will start by asking if any of the commissioners have had any ex parte communications, site visits, independent investigations, anything else that might put you in a position where you cannot consider this matter fairly based upon the evidence and the law. Okay, hearing none, does anybody have any questions concerning this matter? I do have a couple of questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
I do as well.
Okay, Mr. Landers, go ahead.
One is regarding the monitoring. I mean, how do you monitor the amount of chickens on property? I mean,
Very good question. And let me first start by saying that for this type of approval, it is specific as to the type of animal and to the number of animal. So that is a condition of this approval. It is restricted to 8 and 8 chickens. Our code enforcement officers, if they get a complaint, will go out there and verify both the location of where the coop is supposed to be and the number of birds. And let me also sort of give you a little context and a little background. The way the county's LDRs are written, in a residential zoning district, which this is, and the need for the approval, in a residential zoning district, you can have up to 4 pets, and that includes chickens. So you could have 4 chickens in a single family just with the straight zoning code. And it's really in this case, 4 additional, although the applicant did indicate to me that they do have 2 indoor pets. They have an indoor bird apparently and an indoor dog, so they already have 2 pets. But if you didn't have any in this residential area, you could have 4 chickens or 4 other types of pet type animals. So that's just sort of the context and the background for the code. But yes, it can be monitored. It's easy enough to monitor. The plan shows where the coop is at, and the code enforcement officers can.
Okay, so we are clear by granting this permit approval. We are not giving open-ended approval for a non-commercial kennel, period. It is a kennel that will allow 8 chickens.
Correct. It would not allow 8 dogs. It is specific to the type of animal and the number of animals.
Okay, and that was ultimately my question. Out of curiosity, is there a residence on that side of the property?
There's not. Let me just. I was hoping I'd included an aerial and I hadn't, but let me just run through a short, sort of, couple slides, and that'll give you a feel for it. This is actually the subject property, and it is sort of at the end of the road. There's a house catty corner, and there's a street, and then vacant property. The coop, as it turns out, to meet the 30-foot setback, is actually going to go essentially right on the patio, adjacent to the home, and you'll see that in a second. Here's a little bit closer up of the home, so you can kind of get a feel for it. It'll be screened by the house itself, by vegetation, both near and at the property line. And then sorry about this. North is pointing south, so this reverses the...
Oh, I wondered why I had
North,
trouble.
yes.
I said, I literally put east, west.
I wanted to keep the text up, but that is, that's the 30-foot setback and where the coop is, and this is actually the patio of the home. And north, again, is pointing this direction. So, and that's really the presentation. With that, staff would recommend approval with the conditions that no roosters, no loud birds, no other types of animals, certainly, and that it's supposed to be non-commercial, so there's not supposed to be any sales. This is sort of a typical condition that gets rolled in as far as no sale of chickens or eggs. And with that, I would conclude the presentation.
Okay, and I think your comments answered any questions I had. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, it is on consent. The materials constitute the evidence in the matter. I'll go ahead then and ask for any motions with respect to this.
Motion to approve with staff conditions.
Brognano, motion to
I'll
approve.
second.
And we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Is this the Lawsons over here, by the way? How do you do, sir? Welcome. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 5. This is also a quasi-judicial matter. It is not on consent. It is the Commons at Waterway Village, request for preliminary PD plan plat approval for 76 residential lots to be known as the Commons at Waterway Village, pods H, I, and J. DeVosta Homes P.L. is the owner. Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. is the agent. It's located on the south side of 53rd Street, on the east and west side of 51st Court. The zoning district is PD, which is planned development. The land use designation is L2, which is low-density residential 2, up to 6 units per acre. It is quasi-judicial, so once again, I'll start by asking if anybody has had any ex-parte communications, site visits, independent investigations, or has any other reason why they cannot consider this matter fairly and based on the evidence presented today. I will disclose that when I was county attorney, I worked on this project, primarily a joint effort, as I recall correctly. I think we amended the development order. We went to court and kind of a stipulated amendment, but I came out of that with neither good or bad feelings about Waterway Village. So anybody who's going to testify in this matter, please stand and be sworn by the clerk.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, we'll start with by opening the hearing and ask for the county's presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Plakwich. For the record, John McCoy with the County Planning Department. This is a request from Waterway Village for pods H, I, and J. And it is, the subject site is located at the north side of the Waterway Village development, just south of 53rd Street. What you have is you have 51st Court, that is the open paved road that runs up through the project and bisects it, connecting from 53rd to 59th. These R's I have on the location map mean those are the residential components, and that's what's before you all here tonight. In the conceptual plan, there is a commercial out parcel that's roughly shown with the C, and that is not to be considered tonight, but that is part of the overall conceptual plan. So location is on the east and west side of 51st Court, with the majority being on the east side of 51st Court. This aerial shows the location and fairly well in context of the development. Again, residential development, commercial parcel, residential lots. If you are out there today, 51st Court is built. There are homes built immediately in this area south. The area, these are pods S, T, and U, which are presently under construction. Pod R is just completed construction, and there are homes being built here, and there are also homes being built down in this area. These are pods M, N, O, and P that were the subject of an application earlier this year that came before you all. What the applicant's proposing with these 3 pods. This basically consists of almost 23 acres, 76 residential single-family units, the perimeter buffers, and the common area tracks. And this shows the layout. So you have 8 lots on the west side of 51st Court. Again, the future, as is now proposed, commercial development, and then the remainder of the residential lots. This shows the traffic circulation, and essentially with the traffic circulation plan, the pods on the east and west side will connect to 51st Court, a little bit south of the intersection with 53rd Street. The intersection with 53rd Street is signalized, so this is a signalized intersection. And once the residents get to 51st Court, they can either go to 53rd Street or travel south, and it connects to 49th Street, and this is an unsignalized intersection at 49th Street. And once they're on 53rd Street, they can go to 58th Avenue or over to US 1 or further east. As far as dedications and improvements go, there's not a whole lot with these pods as far as dedications and improvements. There's internal sidewalks that will essentially be built on a unit-by-unit basis with the homes. The common area improvements will be built as part of the subdivision improvements. There are existing sidewalks along 51st Court and 53rd Street. Those need to be maintained, and those will be also inspected at the time of what's called a certificate of completion for the subdivision improvements to make sure that those sidewalks do remain in good shape. As far as environmental items, most of those were addressed earlier in the Waterway Village process, so it's the typical land clearing, tree removal, erosion control that would be part of the environmental portions of this. As far as a buffer plan, let me describe that to you all. Essentially, there are perimeter buffers on 53rd Street, on 51st Court, and 51st Court as it extends down. This is the entrance to the lakes of Waterway Village. So essentially, there's a road behind these lots, so it's also buffered with what we call a double frontage buffer, and this actually exceeds what would be a double frontage buffer. Then, interior to the commercial parcel, there's essentially a large common area that's buffered, and then got a greater separation distance between any residential units. And then here, a more narrow area, but a more intense buffer between the eastern edge of the commercial and the residential units to the east of that. With that, I would like to get to the recommendation, and staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant preliminary plat approval for pods H, I, and J with the conditions in the staff report. Those tie to getting detailed landscape plans with the land development permit, getting the buffers constructed with a certificate of completion, and then making sure that all this correct sidewalk work is done with the certificate of completion or with the homes. Thank you.
Does any commissioner have any questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Landers.
You mentioned the buffering from the commercial piece to the residential, and I guess a concern that I would have for the the residences going in first and down the road, commercial showing up, and then we hear, well, we didn't know commercial was going in there and it's obtrusive and so on and so forth. Can you elaborate on the buffering that's required, and then also on the east side of that, it looks like a little cut through off the road. What is that? Right there on the curve of the road, there's like a open area.
Are you talking? Oh, okay.
Yeah, right through there.
I'm going to double check the plans to find out what that is. This is an internal buffer. There's no required buffer, like a type of buffer like an A, B, C, or D at this particular junction. But this is a buffer that the Waterway Village has chosen to put in. And if I were to say, I would say it would be like a C type of buffer. And you're correct. It's happened more than once where residents move in, and whether it's been disclosed or not, oftentimes they're upset if the commercial development does come to fruition. If I'm remembering correctly, I think they're allowed up to 20,000 square feet of what would be categorized as neighborhood commercial. And neighborhood commercial in our zoning code is it's kind of a legacy zoning district. We don't zone property that much anymore, but we do keep it in the code because we do have some properties out there zoned neighborhood commercial, but that would be the list of uses they have to choose from.
In that small open area coming off the curve of the road?
Stan is checking on that, so we'll get that information for you. I'll turn it over to the applicant may shed some insight on that because
If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Daniel Sorrow with Kotler and Hearing, agents for the applicant and the property owner, Pulte Homes. Thank you for this opportunity this evening to speak. We do have Garrett Dinsmore with the Pulte Group here and Aaron Struckmeyer with Kimley Horn. Should you have any questions. That area that is in reference is a secondary EMS access for emergency vehicles. We took it upon ourselves to provide 2 points of ingress and egress to that commercial out parcel. Not something that is required by code, but we thought it was a good idea in case one entrance would be blocked, we'd have a secondary entrance. So that would be a stabilized access, not a paved roadway, but just stabilized access. The main access to that future commercial parcel would be off the main road. As staff mentioned, John, thank you for the presentation. 20,000 square feet of neighborhood commercial. We'd have to come back before this board with a separate site plan approval to develop that commercial parcel. But really the landscaping and buffering from the commercial to the residential is above and beyond what your land development regulations require. The developer has taken it upon himself to enhance those buffers and to provide a substantial amount of trees and shrubs and ground covers above what your code requires because they care about the aesthetics. And just one note on this plan, which is a difference from the rest of the pods at Waterway Villages, we're using Royal Palms as our street trees. There's been some concerns about the HOA having to deal with some of the uplifting of the sidewalks and some of the root invasion of the sidewalks. So for this particular product type, we went to Royal Palms for the street trees, and we're providing berming and buffering along the major roadways and throughout the residential pods in the open space. So we're excited about this phase of the development and ready to move forward, and we just ask that you grant staff's recommendation for approval this evening.
Any other questions from members of the commission? I do have just a quick question. I'm assuming from the presentation of the materials that you gave us that everything consistent with what they're presently requesting approval for, or everything included within what they're requesting approval for today, is consistent with the original development order that governs the overall site.
That is correct.
Okay.
It is consistent. There's ongoing monitoring. In this case, there's a report that comes out every 2 years that benchmarks certain things. There are certain improvements that are coming up, and the applicant can speak to this. The main one is some improvements to 58th Avenue, which would occur in the 2020 calendar year, or should at that point either number of units or time trigger. The others that are sort of significant that have yet to occur will be the construction of 43rd Avenue. And it's going to be constructed in sort of two segments. It'll be constructed with pods S, T, and U from 51st, or excuse me, from Waterway Village Boulevard to 53rd Street with the land development permit improvements for this pod. And then the second part will come south to 49th Street. And there'll be a signalized intersection at that time with, or a four-way signalized intersection at that point with 49th Street. The other item worth mentioning that I neglected to mention was this is the last residential area that hasn't received preliminary PD approval that falls west of 43rd Avenue. So this is the last preliminary PD for the residential portion that falls west of 43rd Avenue.
Whose responsibility to build the extension to 43rd Avenue?
That's Waterway, the developer's responsibility.
I was thinking that. Okay. Any other questions? Anything else more from the county staff? Anything else more from the applicant?
No, thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, any member of the public like to be heard on this? If not, we'll go ahead and close the hearing. Gentlemen, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve with staff recommendations.
Mr. Brognano, motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Dr. Day, second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda, let me find my agenda. Commissioners' matters, item 6. Are there any commissioners' matters? Not hearing any. Planning matters, item 7. You do have the planning materials. Staff care to comment on any of those?
Not the materials, but just, Mr. Chairman, since the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the Board of Commissioners took action on the Land Development Regulation Amendment that you all recommended they approved. That was to Chapter 904, nonconformities. Remember that we created that kind of special category of county-initiated zoning, change setbacks for an existing house. They could do additions. So they approved that. And this is the only meeting in November because of the holidays, so happy Thanksgiving. And we have only one meeting scheduled for December, and that'll be December 14th.
I'm sorry, what date?
December 14th.
14th. Very good. Anything else from the commissioners? Attorneys' matters, anything?
Nope.
Anything else to come before us tonight? If not, meeting's adjourned.